Hello and welcome to today's A-Team Group webinar on solving the operations talent crisis. My name's Sarah Underwood. I'm an editor here at A-Team Group and I'll be moderating the webinar. Our expert speakers today are Emma Beale, Investment Data Management Director at M&G Investments, Tom Cunningham, Head of Investment Operations at Hargreaves Lansdown, and Julian Trostinsky, Global Support and Strategic Business Development at Gresham Technologies. I'll ask our speakers to introduce themselves shortly, but first a few hints and tips to make best use of the webinar for our audience. To the right of the video, you'll see a box for questions and polls. We'll be running 3 audience polls today, so do take part. It's always good to hear how you see things in these spaces. So I'll let you know when the polls are coming up, so do go ahead and vote when they do. And also place your questions in the other channel whenever you want to. We'll gather them together and ask them during the webinar so that we can answer as many as we can. Okay, enough of me and let me come to our speakers. Emma, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your interest here.
Hi everybody. So as Sarah said, I'm Emma Beale, responsible for the data within operations and also the reporting team as well at M&G. I've worked in data and therefore operations for about 15 years now. Always on the investment management side of the business at M&G, so working very closely with our investment teams, our clients as well.
Thank you. Tom.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Tom Cunningham. I run investment ops for Hargreaves Lansdown. So I'm responsible for all post-trade execution activities. That's middle and back office, trading, reporting, and anything that keeps our business functioning and in the black, as it were. So we run a range of in-house and third-party funds, and I've been doing that for a number of years. Prior to Hargreaves, I was at Jupiter for a number of years as running the operations and technology team there. And prior to that, Columbia Threadneedle, where I was the CTO there for quite a few years as well.
Okay, lovely. Over to you, Julian.
Julian Trostinsky. I oversee customer success and strategic business development for Gresham. I've been in the financial industry working as a vendor for almost 25 years now. I have held many different positions within the financial industry, including setting up reconciliation shared services for different financial institutions as well.
Great, thank you very much indeed. And let's get going. Let's start with an audience poll. The question this time, how would you describe the extent of back office operations talent at your organization? You probably don't need long to think about this one, but while you answer the question, let me come back to Tom to set the scene by describing how he sees the state of back office talent in financial institutions.
Yeah, that's a very pertinent question at this moment in time. And I would answer it differently now than I would pre-COVID, because I think COVID's had quite a significant impact on operations in general, certainly middle and back office operations. We've seen an exodus, certainly in our side of the business, of the more senior people as they've chosen to take either early retirement or other career choices. And also there's been quite a significant impact in terms of the regional reallocation of people, as now most people are on remote or hybrid contracts or hybrid working practices, which means that there's no longer that pull towards London as a central hub. But it does also mean that you're now paying very, very competitive prices for anyone, no matter where they are in the UK. So it's caused a lot of compression at the more skilled end of the workforce, and it's harder to get those people in. But it's also had an adverse effect on the younger part of the organization, because remote working and hybrid working is a much harder challenge as you enter the business, because people aren't there to learn off or mentor as much as they were.
Okay. Emma, what's your experience? You're at the sharp end as well.
Yeah, so I suppose just taking a step back and looking at the environment, and Tom, I agree, I think COVID has definitely changed quite a lot. And if we look at where we are now with market volatility, Russia, Ukraine, the things that are going on around the world, in the UK, the cost of living crisis, etc., all of that has a very big impact upon your resource and in your talent. Coming off the back of lockdown in the UK and COVID, we saw that the recruitment market was just so fast. So, people were moving and maybe had stuck for a longer time because of what was going on and uncertainty. And then coming out of lockdown, there was a lot of movement. So much so that when you were recruiting, you couldn't get to your second interview before that person had got snapped up by another organisation. So it was very hard, not just to retain the people, but actually to bring new people into the organisation, because the demand was just so high across the industry.
Okay, let's see what our audience is thinking here. So please, could we see those first poll results? And Tom, if you'd like to comment on that, it seems fairly dramatically obvious. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a fair reflection on where people are. It's, as Emma's alluded to, it's very, very hard to get people through the process now quickly enough. As in line with what she said, if you don't offer within a week or two, you're not going to get the candidate, and it's very hard to get through a process that quickly. And then off the back of it as well, in line with the changes in the wider market and the volatility we're seeing across the general market, there's a lot of change going on, an awful lot of change, and that requires new and more people to do as you're still having to run BAU. So there's a lot of resource compression across the whole service lines, and it's not just operations. We have the same problem in the legal area. We've got the same problem in the partnership area and the sales area. So it's an industry-wide issue at the minute.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Coming back to you, Emma, you've talked about COVID and so on. Has this always been a difficult area to recruit and retain in terms of operations talent?
I think it's definitely amplified since COVID, the challenges, definitely. I think the thing with the operations function is there's so many different capabilities in there, so many different skill sets, resource types, etc., that you need in order to run. Very, very sort of complex areas, lots of analysis that's needed, technology, development, processing, oversight of third parties, suppliers. It's a very big area, and I do think that it's always been hard to get that right balance, to get that right mix of resources. But things like COVID and market volatility have definitely made it more challenging. Saying that, I think the key thing that we need to remember is that our subject matter experts are absolutely critical. And so even though, let's say you can get people through the door and you can recruit, actually keeping that corporate knowledge is so important, because the things that we're doing are so complex and move so quickly, and things come from all different areas. You really need a high level of specialism, and sometimes you need that experience within that organization before you can really deliver the value. One of the challenges that we face is a lot of the time it's the same people that we need, that we have to call upon time and time again. So back to that poll study, is we never seem to have enough people. Maybe there's just not enough of certain people to go around.
Okay, Julian, bringing you in here, what would you add to Emma's comments in terms of, is it always a difficult problem recruiting in ops?
So I think that it has something to do with the requirements that are continuously increasing, data that is always growing, and the fact that unfortunately financial industry is still leveraging decade-old technologies that are no longer suit the purpose. So the problem you have is an almost dual problem, right? Where technology cannot keep up with the requirements that the industry brings, and the resources that are being brought on board are not necessarily in line with what they need to be doing. So they're completely outside their comfort zone, and they last a few months and then they move on.
Okay, fine. And coming back to you, Tom, how can financial institutions analyze operations performance and identify and understand where the problems lie?
That is the golden goose if you can answer that properly. You know, and in line with what Julian and Emma just alluded to, not everybody classifies operations, operational areas the same. You know, in a lot of cases, you'll have performance attribution, quantitative analysis in operations. And that means your whole skill set is going from the whole investment side all the way to the back office, and can include everything from complex derivative processing all the way up to performance attribution on a daily basis of some credit opportunities funds. So the breadth of skills you require is immense. So traditionally it was quite easy because you had KPIs and SLAs against your middle and back office. You know, it's quite easy to define the time period you wanted for your valuation points or your what you were getting out of your third-party providers or your TPS or your custodians, because that was the traditional model. But that's not really the case in a lot of areas anymore, where those things have changed. And what the vehicles that people are using have changed as well. They're over the last couple of years, funds have got more complex, more timely. The settlement periods have come in. The diversity of interest of instruments in them has grown. You've got segregated mandates, you know, in a lot of funds, which have complete drill through capability, so that what you need and require is so much more complex than it was before. So you're now looking at OKRs, stretch targets, as well as your traditional KPIs and SLAs. And also you've got to look at the human element of it as well, because traditionally it's always been about volume-based metrics and control matrices, but now you're having to look at the individual requirements of people, because as Emma touched on, the SMEs are key, and they tend to be the older members of staff in a lot of cases, because they have grown from the earlier days of the industry where it was a bit more manual, but that meant that you had a more holistic view of the whole operating environment, so you learned all the key components. Certainly younger members of staff you get from bigger institutions have a very compartmentalized and siloed view of the world, because scale has meant they have to focus on one particular area. So they've got a lot of deep knowledge in one area, but they haven't got the same breadth of some of the older members of staff, who are obviously the ones that you're at greatest danger of losing as they get closer to retirement age.
Okay. Julian, what would you say here in terms of identifying the problems? What do you see when you're out in the market?
So I would echo what Tom said. I think at the end of the day, financial institutions could and should probably continue leveraging their key performance indicators, primarily to quantify, measure, track, and project whatever they need to do for their operations team. But I would also imagine that it's worth reviewing what could potentially be outsourced, and outsourced to more of, I guess, an expert or experts in a field that they're trying to outsource. And that could potentially help, right? Because it would give you that balance between what you're outsourcing, what you're keeping in-house. It would potentially allow you to keep those SMEs in-house, retain employees for much longer. I also think that there's been plenty of studies done pretty much since COVID by many large organizations, and it has been proven that keeping talent in the current situation with continuous growth and demand within the industry is not easy, especially senior subject matter expertise. That's the key.
Okay. So let's try and see if it can be resolved in-house, which is sounding increasingly difficult. And Emma, how can firms approach this and take these problems on in-house? What can you do at that level?
I think the first thing is to consider, what is that employee proposition? People want different things from their employer, from their job, from their career, at different stages in their lives. And the organization changes as well. And I think we need to think about all of those things that are making that employee proposition attractive to people. Remuneration is just one aspect, remuneration and benefits. We've talked about COVID, but of course, hybrid working is very important to some, you know, and even in that, appreciating some people want to be in the office, some people want to be at home. And so flexibility is a lot more important and more commonplace than it used to be. Culture, the culture of the organisation is so important for a person to feel that they can identify with the organisation, that they have that sense of belonging. And that's very difficult just to do straight away. You know, these are things that organisations have to work on, and it's important that from a senior leadership position, things like staff engagement surveys are critical, you know, ensuring that an organisation is looking at the opportunities for people, is continuously working on maybe where there's challenges that are raised by the employees. It's so important that that much, I suppose, broader package is brought together. I think learning and development is really important. So when people join the organisation, them knowing that there are opportunities for them. They're not going to be in that same role if they don't want to be, you know, and that can mean different things to different people. It doesn't necessarily mean being promoted and going up, but actually the breadth of what they can learn. I think as managers where we are struggling with resource and we don't have enough, it's very easy to think, I just need to keep these people here doing what I need to be doing. But actually for the organisation, it might be better that we're promoting secondments, you know, that we're creating that agility amongst the team, amongst the broader organisation. So opportunities, training, development, etc., etc. I think that really is the thing that's going to mean that an organisation is going to be recommended. You're going to recommend it to your friends, to your potential colleagues. It's going to attract people and hopefully mean that they're more likely to stay. The one other thing that I would say is look at the recruitment process. So we've talked about the speed by which it's, you know, candidates might have taken up another offer by the time that, you know, you're offering them. Look at the recruitment process, look at how you're interviewing, what means you're doing, and really important for recruiting managers, line up your interviewers. So for example, if I'm interviewing, I will interview a person, I will already have people on the sidelines ready for the second interview round. So I know I've secured their time. So literally, if I see a good candidate, I say, right, let's push straight through to the second interview process now. So it's just sort of preparing for that to make sure that you're able to respond quickly when you do find that right candidate.
Okay, thank you. Tom, would you add to that?
Only briefly, in terms of, you know, from our perspective, work-life balance is now one of the key factors that we look at. Gone are the days for a lot of people that, you know, you sat in the cubicle and that was your 9 to 5. It's much more like a coffee shop in some respects now, the work-life balance, where you've got a lot of more comfortable surroundings and you can interact with people in a more social as well as a business oriented function. But you know, from the in-house perspective, our big focus is on internal staff, so we look to other internal areas to push that career progression through. So most of our new roles go internally way before they go out to the external market, and we have a whole internal mechanism that pushes people up where they want to, obviously, into different roles and different opportunities, both horizontally and vertically. And that's our key driver. And that's where we look to address a lot of this, because if, you know, people want to progress in a lot of cases and they want to expand their horizons, and that's you're already winning half the argument, because they've got the aptitude and the hunger to grow into it, and that's half the battle in a lot of cases.
Okay, thank you both. Let's run another audience poll here. The question this time, what is your key concern if operations cannot keep pace with business volume or growth? And I think we've sort of touched on that as probably being a factor quite often in the business. While you answer the question, let me come over to Julian to talk about the barriers to business growth as financial institutions scale if there's no expansion in the internal ops headcount. What happens then?
Well, a lot of bad things will happen because at the end of the day, and we've discussed majority of the barriers already, but I would imagine the simple fact that you will have fewer resources with end-to-end operational knowledge and even lesser resources who understand an end-to-end business process. Your business will start suffering. You then have you will have complete lack of operational improvement, right? You will literally operate in a lights on type of an approach on an ongoing basis. You won't be able to properly address things in timely manner. You will end up with most likely continuously leveraging technologies that are spread out throughout the company that are not necessarily fit for purpose. I think you will lack measurement capabilities from a management point of view. So there are definitely many, many barriers.
Okay. Emma, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of very similar to what Julian said, really. I mean, it definitely does stunt a business's ability to grow and adapt. Operations is so core and fundamental. So it would have to, as Julian said, I suppose, revert to just keeping the lights on, and inevitably at some point that will cause some type of issue, and actually you might need to end up spending more to get yourself out of that hole that you've created.
Fair enough. Let's see what our audience is thinking. If we could see the poll results, please. And this time, Emma, would you like to comment? Oh, look, quite a few problems here. Reduced business revenues and growth, hit on the competitive position, exhausted operation teams, and regulatory compliance and audit risk. What would you say to those, Emma?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that's a very compelling and yes, all of those things I would definitely agree with. The challenge that you have is with that third one about exhausted operations teams and loss of talent. You know, any goodwill that people have to keep going will run out at some point if there's not light at the end of the tunnel, as it were. Operations is a very challenging and demanding area to work in, but also a very fulfilling area to work in. But if you're not giving people those opportunities to grow and not to keep pace with what's going on in the organisation, yeah, it could become very demotivating.
Okay, from the negative, let's stay with you, Emma, to talk about some of the more positive things you can do here and how these barriers can be removed using automation, control, and external third parties. And perhaps you'd like to touch on the difference between managed services and outsourcing here.
Yeah, sure. So I think in terms of those different areas, I think companies should pursue all of them, and maybe all of them simultaneously. So I think automation is always key. It's always been a factor in operations, but now there is so much more advanced opportunities for automation. RPA, etc. So there's so much in there that companies should have as a continuous practice. There might be some big bang things to go after, but it's important to keep on top of it as a regular item, automation being a regular agenda item on a business's path to ensure they can continue to scale and also ensure minimal issues and errors, etc. With regards to, I suppose, external organisations that can help, so I think outsource and managed service, those terms are sometimes interchangeable in terms of how they are used. I look at outsourcing in terms of a company has given a function, a set of processes, almost put a box around something and given it to another organisation to do, which has huge benefits. Because you could be utilising an organisation that can deliver scale. They can deliver global around, that sort of follow the sun model, which can be very advantageous to an organization. They could do so and allow the business to grow and focus on other areas. And it's definitely something that presents a lot of opportunities. Managed service. So rather than sort of lifting that whole area out, I sort of see managed services is more of a scale in terms of you can think of a managed service more as a continuation of your resource pool. So, and actually utilize them in different ways in which you work together to see fit, sometimes in an advisory capacity, sometimes in a specialist skill set, sometimes in adopting a number of processes and performing them for you. So they can be very, very different. But I think as an organisation, we have to keep looking at all of these opportunities and, like I say, potentially exploring many at the same time. From my observations of, say, like market data vendors, many years ago, it used to be that data vendors were, I suppose, were more traditional in terms of they would deliver data. They would deliver data to an organisation, whereas now how some of these large organisations have evolved is that they're not only providing data, but they're providing technology. They're also providing managed services. And so it's a very different market than it used to be. And where you have got strategic relationships with some big organisations, and the fact that we say we have never going to have enough resources, no matter what we do, we're not got enough resources. Some of these really big players, it's pushing them to get the most that you possibly can out of that relationship and exploring what more they could do for you, and maybe something that you could co-build together as well to help.
Okay, thank you. Julian, as a provider, how do you see the importance of automation, control, third-party provision?
So I'm actually very glad that Emma said that we should look at multiple different ways and multiple different things at one time. What we do see is that through automations, the clients and prospects that we are speaking to are striving to achieve four main things, right? The first thing is centralizing the operational processes. The second one would be to eliminate anything that's manually induced and manually heavy from the resources point of view, because that's what costs the most money, right? So, sorry, if an auditor walks in, finds an issue, the fine that you can end up receiving could potentially be tremendous, right? The third thing would be continuous growth. So without automation, taking on additional responsibilities as an operational team without adding that extra staff, it'll simply be impossible. And then the final thing is the cost effectiveness. And not just to be most cost effective from the start, but to maintain that efficiency of the cost going forward. As for the differences between managed services and outsourcing, so I believe that when you outsource, you simply transfer the problem that you are having onto someone else, perhaps at a lower cost, but definitely with very little improvement overall. Managed service works slightly different. Managed service adopts more of a business-like approach and delivers on the service with the strive to be more of a outcome-based service, rather than just continuously hiring, training people for the sake of delivering something. It does allow clients to gain efficiencies through centralizing the deployment of the service, getting onboarded very quickly, eliminating certain things from a technical point of view. Emma touched on a data, at Gresham, we specialized in data collection and normalization. That's one of the biggest deliverables that we actually do for clients on top of the solutions that we provide. So, yeah, that's what I think we can get if we start automating and start looking at what could potentially go somewhere else.
Okay, fine. So moving on from there and coming back over to you, Tom, when considering using managed services, how can firms decide what to move out and what to keep in? And why is that such an important decision?
It's quite an interesting area because we've done it multiple times. And some areas are some parts of the business are much easier to encompass than others. So initially you focus on the straight economics and the P&L, the revenue, the margins, and you look at various things like what's repeatable, scalable, what can other people do better at scale than you can, because obviously some of the more volume-based activities require quite a large technical footprint. In the past that was distributed, now it's in the cloud, and that brings with it a whole infrastructure backbone that you've got to support. So those decisions are a lot easier. So for the more volume-centric areas of the business, that's a much easier decision to get to. But you also need to look at your core skills and abilities, because in a heavily regulated marketplace, you obviously still have to retain responsibility for whatever you give out to a managed service or a partnership or an outsourced capability. So you need to have the skills to oversee what you're going to give to somebody else. And that can be tricky in some areas. And certainly when you're looking at things that should be quite simplistic, like regulatory reporting, for instance, AFID reporting, it can get quite complex, but it's very, very time consuming to do. So it's an area where you would definitely look at, but you also have to look at the cost to serve as well. So yeah, you need to have a finger on the economics of your overall firm and which areas are key to that as well. So you've got to understand where your USPs are. You've got to understand what your business is actually trying to do and how it's going to grow. So you've got to align, these decisions, which are all strategic in nature, against your bigger overall, 2, 3, 5 year plan, whatever it is. Because obviously, if you have a plan that includes a lot of fund launches, for instance, is a good example, and you've just outsourced your implementation team or your transition management team, that might not be the best solution in the short term for where you're going. So you've got to weigh it up in terms of where the business is going and where you see the benefits will be, because it used to be the case where your traditional consultancy firm would come in and say, you can make this amount of staff savings by moving it somewhere else. But the reality that sits behind that is you don't realize those efficiencies in that way, because you end up having to oversee what they're doing, and you also want to retrain some of the staff to more value-add activities, because in some cases it's not a lessening of what you're doing, or it's more a case of you want to refocus the staff on more value-add. So you're trying to, the more repeatable processes give to somebody who can scale at a much greater level. So there's a whole matrix that sits behind it, but it is quite quantitative in a lot of cases.
Okay, thank you, Emma. What would you add there? And perhaps to that point, why is it so important that you get this right?
So I suppose I don't have a huge amount to add to what Tom said. The one thing maybe slightly different though is thinking, what can you not do? Which might not always be the first thing that springs to mind, but actually looking at what you do as an operations function and saying, where is the value? Is there anything actually there that can just be stopped? And being a bit brutal when you do that self-assessment, really. I think a lot of activities will have taken place for many, many years. So looking at those and actually saying, well, is there value in this anymore? Should we just not do it, let alone not outsource it, managed service? What's the impact if we actually stop this? So just a slightly different maybe perspective on it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's very important that you strike the right balance. And sometimes you might make decisions in terms of what's outsourced or maybe offshored, etc. And ensuring that, I suppose, come back to what Tom said, it's where's the value add, where's the business strategy, making sure that you're aligned to that. In some areas, it is very much the case that you might try something and think, actually, that wasn't quite right. We need to tweak that now. We need to optimize it in some way, or maybe change decisions. But it's really important to go into those processes with a very strong due diligence understanding of what you're trying to aim for and what are the business outcomes that you think that you'll get off the back of that.
Okay, smashing. Thank you both. Let's run a final audience poll here, and it asks, what do you see as the main benefits of augmenting your operations with a managed service? You've got quite a long list to choose from, and this time you can tick as many of the boxes as you feel are appropriate to your organization. And while you do that, let me come over to Julian and ask him how he identifies the cost and talent and time benefits that managed services can offer as the business scales.
So at Gresham, we actually believe that the desired outcome of a successfully deployed managed service is to improve the overall operational process and then naturally reduce the cost of ownership, right? While speaking to existing clients who are interested in managed service or speaking to prospects who are specifically looking for managed service providers, we aim to deliver on three main areas. The first one being the fact that the client is able to access the service with minimal upfront implementation cost and time involved to deploy the solution that we're deploying. The second thing is obviously through the solution itself and the key service components that it brings. So I've mentioned in the past data aggregation and normalization, obviously state-of-the-art reconciliation solutions, exceptions management, workflow capabilities, ability to monitor, stick to the SLAs and things of that nature, which is pretty standard to the service component itself. And then finally, and I think this is pretty important for the organizations, is we guarantee that their requirements will be satisfied through the service without a need to add additional overheads and additional resources. So.
Okay, lovely. I'm going to ask for the poll results now, if I may, and see how our audience sees things. Well, there you go. Julian, over to you on this one. This is where people see benefit in managed services. What would you say to that?
So I think it's in line with what we discussed earlier. I think at the end of the day, reducing the cost of operations is the key. And there has to be flexibility in how you do that. I think I'm surprised with a couple of numbers, but I'm glad that the reduced cost of operations is at the very top. I would imagine increased efficiency and continuity being slightly higher than 50%, but hey, 50% is still, yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, that's great. Thank you, everybody, for voting. And let's take a break here for some audience questions. And I have them here. Let me come to you first, Emma, and I'm going to put two questions together here. So if you need me to read them again, that's fine. It says, it's hard to achieve buy-in for anything at the moment. How could we do this for managed services? There's a bit of a sub-question here. With spend freezes and budget cuts at present, do you have any suggestions on a persuasive business case for contractors in niche areas? So first, how do you get buy-in for managed services? And then how do you get the niche people you need?
Yeah, so I think on the first point around managed service, it is wholly making sure that you're aligned to the business strategy and being able to demonstrate what that managed service is going to allow you to achieve in order to meet that business strategy, whether it's grow the business, expand into a different region, etc. So it's understanding what the business is doing and being able to put forward those benefits and those business outcomes that a managed service will help you, whether that could be you'll be able to get there quicker, you'll be able to scale, you'll be able to support different time regions, different locations, different needs, etc., etc. It's being able to tell that story, to package that business case. Cost is obviously always important with these things. If there are opportunities to reduce costs, I think that's always looked upon fondly. However, it's really important to consider where it's capacity creation as well. So actually using a managed service to create capacity with your in-house staff so that they can work on X, Y, Z. And it might be so that they can then work on the business strategy. Again, that point around how you utilize your SMEs.
Okay, and how do you get the last bit, a persuasive business case for contractors in niche areas?
Yeah, and that's, I think contractors is very, very difficult in terms of it obviously comes with an increased cost. It comes with an increased risk in terms of a contractor could leave the organization within a short period of time. And however, they can bring with them a lot of expertise. I think what's really useful is to actually set out a strategy of what that balance is. So not just to go after a contractor in the moment, but actually to know what is that ratio that you're looking for. In what areas would you always utilize contractors, and demonstrating that the value that brings versus what is then that balance that you would look at permanent staff or fixed term contracts, etc. I think being able to articulate that and have an agreement that is a good balance based on what that operations function is looking to achieve is very useful. And then when you do look to raise that new requirement for a contractor, you can demonstrate that is in line with the recruitment strategy that you follow.
Okay, thank you. Tom, one for you here. It says, where should the responsibility lie for managed services in an FI?
Well, the responsibility for managed services will always come back onto the host firm, because under the whatever regulatory environment you're operating on, but certainly in the UK, whether it's PROD, COL, SIS, you will still be responsible for the ultimate service, whether it's retail or institutional. So, you have to have complete oversight and control of whatever you've decided to utilize via a third party, because you're ultimately responsible.
Who is that then? The CTO, CDO?
So it'll be the head of the functional area, or the SMF under SMCR. So for an operational component, it'll be the head of operations or the COO ultimately.
Okay, thank you very much. And Julian, coming to you, I have a couple that I think will be interest to you. And the first, as you've touched on this already, but it asks, what should we be looking for when selecting a managed service provider? There are so many out there.
Well, depending on what you are trying to outsource, I think this is where you would need to start, right? I think prior to deciding on the provider of the managed service, the main goal is to understand what it is that's being outsourced, right? So are you trying to free up IT or business resources? Are you trying to reduce cost on both sides? Are you looking to improve an overall performance or an operational process? Based on that, you would probably need to start asking some very pointed questions of the organizations that you are speaking to, and understand what it is that they're providing as a managed service, right? Because again, you don't want to end up with a body shop as a service provider, because it'll just be, throwing more bodies at a problem. It will not improve anything during the process.
Okay, fine. And another one here for you, Julian. It says, data security always comes up when we talk about moving ops to managed services. How can we reassure colleagues worried about security, and how good should it be? Obviously, this is something that comes up pretty much around everything we talk about. How do you ensure people and reassure them that security is, right there?
So we normally go through very rigorous infosecurity process with any organization that is outsourcing, whether or not it's a simple SaaS outsourcing where we just host the solutions for them, or where we provide an end-to-end managed service. I think every single financial institution has an InfoSec type of group of people, and they have a ton of questions that they normally send out to the vendors. We've seen InfoSecs, with 200 questions or 650 questions, right? It depending on how complex the process and the components that you are outsourcing. And then the vendors normally need to go through the review of these questions and provide the answers, which are then reviewed internally. Anything that is a red flag gets presented back to the vendor, and everybody agrees on the mitigation strategy and how it will be addressed. But that would probably be the best way. Data security for us comes up every single deal.
Yeah, comes up everywhere, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for your questions to our audience. And sorry we haven't answered all of them, but I will pass them on to our sponsor today. And thank you to our speakers for their answers. And can I come back to you, Julian? And could you run us through a case study of a firm that has made the migration to managed services, that use the challenges of in-house operations and the outcomes they've achieved?
Sure. So there were a few case studies that I was considering, but this particular one we recently have completed with an independent fund and investment manager organization in North America. Prior to outsourcing, their reconciliation practice was struggling as an overall process, starting with decade-old technology, a very costly infrastructure in-house, support teams that were constantly moving around, and they couldn't really keep up with the demand of their business requirements. Since the move to Gresham Managed Services, we played a crucial role in their growth. They went from 3 billion AUM to 107 billion AUM in less than 10 years while being on the service. And they did that without any additional operational staff or minimal operational staff being added. Through outsourcing, they've also delivered and they've managed to accomplish few things. So the first thing that they did is they completely eliminated a need to worry about data collection and normalization. We do that for them. They reduced the time they take to reconcile for their customers by 60%. They went from 70 hours to 30 hours, and their target is to cut that 30 hours by an additional 50% in the very near future. And the key thing, as previously mentioned, the client managed to scale their volumes and data processing without any additional operational staff. And they're now providing services for 55 custodians, which is continuously growing. And I think that's the key for them. So for them, if no managed service and just bring in a product, they would continuously grow their operational team and provide, the service whichever way they've been providing. Right now, they're definitely scaling up in business and without a need to worry about operational teams growing.
Thank you
Good
very
case
much
study.
indeed. Yes, indeed. Good to get very impressive indeed. Yes. Okay, coming to my last question today, I'd like to ask all our speakers for their guidance for a firm seeking to scale, challenged by operations and looking for alternative solutions. Tom, would you like to start here? What should firms be thinking about?
Certainly. Well, I always think you should be investing in the downturn. So it's the best time of any time to actually look at your processes, your people, your technology, your data, because that's when you get the biggest choice in the market, in effect, across all those spectrums. You should be challenging the status quo. It's not about minimal margin efficiency or operational cost cutting. You should be pushing the strategic agenda, because you should be looking more longer term than just the initial blip, because markets will change. They always do. It's cyclical, and you should be ready for when you come out of that downturn. And people are always key. So we always talk about automation and data and technology, and these are all key components, but it all only hangs together from people. So, people are the fundamental driver of the business, and that's where you should be spending most of your time and resource. That we constantly try to move from a reactive mechanism to a proactive one, and that's where you'll see the benefits of things like managed services, where you can refocus what people are doing into the more value-add activities.
Great. Thank you. Emma, please would you share your thoughts here?
Yeah, so I think recognizing that you can't go it alone. So do reach out to those other organizations, maximize your strategic relationships that you've already got, or look for further opportunities. And it's wholly in line with the business strategy. Understand what it is that the organization's trying to achieve, and then really assess where you are and what that means for you as a function in terms of how you can support and get behind that business strategy. And I suppose similar to Tom, invest in your people. That employee proposition, that is so important. It makes it a much nicer working environment for all, and it's definitely, with the amount of challenges that operations teams are facing, you need a collaborative effort. You need a good team around you. So really important to get that right. And it does take a lot of time and lots of different initiatives, but makes for a much happier and healthier workforce.
Thank you. And Julian, some final words from you, please.
So not to sound like a broken record, but I will echo what Emma and Tom said. So definitely analyze your current staff, shift the responsibilities. Do not be afraid to hire younger staff from more seniors to be subject matter experts, being the leaders. I think COVID has clearly demonstrated that hybrid models, remote working, it's all doable. I would also suggest perform a complete analysis of the products and technologies that you use in-house, because again, all the technologies are no longer fit for purpose, and they simply cannot keep up with the demands of the industry right now. And then probably finally, as Emma mentioned, find that managed service organization and make them an extension of your team. Bring in experts who could potentially help, whether or not on consultative basis or ongoing basis. If you're short on resources who know reconciliations, if you're short on resources who know cash management, billing and invoicing, find an outsourcing provider who would potentially help you out.
Okay, thank you, Julian, and thank you to all our speakers for sharing their experience with us today. Thank you too to Gresham Technologies for sponsoring today's webinar. Before we close, just a few A-Team Group items that may be of interest to you. You can sign up for our 7th of February webinar on taking a holistic approach to buy-side data management. And I should say to you, our audience, you'll find that at the bottom of your screen, and you can click on these items and sign up. Or you can sign up for our next Data Management Summit London, which is shaping up to be a great event, and we'll be hosting it in London on the 30th of March. Finally, you can download our very popular regulatory data handbook. Don't read it, just use it as a sort of reference book, which is now in its 10th edition. That said, that's it for today. So thank you again to Emma, Julian, and Tom. And thank you to all of you who have taken part in the webinar. Please complete our feedback form, as we're always here to hear your views and improve our products. Meantime, thanks again, everybody, and goodbye.